Thanks for joining me for a continuation of my Athearn Blue Box Kitbash series. This video will describe how I created the trucks for the U50C. The trucks used on the General Electric U50C locomotives were originally used on the Union Pacific gas turbines. The Athearn Fairbanks Morris truck is closest in appearance to the General Steel casting trucks used on the U50C. However, only the widely spaced axle pair of the Athearn truck matches the GSC truck. I had to combine the wide spaced axle from two trucks to get the appearance of the GSC truck. I began by disassembling the Athearn Fairbanks Morris trimotor truck. I removed the electrically conductive side frames and axle bearings from the gear tower plastic. I then cut the metal side frame in two pieces through the center of the middle axle bearing seat. The two wide axle side frame halves were then connected using epoxy. The resulting wide spacing 3-axle side frame became the master for resin casting other side frames. The back side of the new master side frame was embedded in modeling clay. 10/1000ths thick styrene was used to make the mold frame. The two-part silicone was weighed and mixed. The silicone was left to cure for 24 hours. After the side frame front mold cured, the modeling clay was removed from the side frame back. I now had the two-part mold necessary to cast my GSC side frames. As can be seen here, the epoxy failed to hold the side frame pieces together permanently. This photo illustrates the result of the first side frame cast with clear resin. In the foreground is the modified metal Athearn Master. This photo illustrates the second side frame casting using black pigmented resin. The next phase of this project was creating the gear drive from the Athearn worm gear down to the axles. I wanted to use all Athearn gears for my GSC truck. The problem was accounting for the new, wider spacing of the third axle. As with the side frames, I initially tried to use the wide axle side of two Athearn gear towers. Here I am cutting off the side frame mounting lug. I now wanted to salvage the wide axle space side of the gear towers. I then marked the midline through the center axle space. I brought the two wide axle space pieces together for the correct axle spacing, but the resulting wide axle spacing did not retain the Athearn worm gear bearing seat. So the axle spacing for the original Athearn gear tower was correct, but correctly positioning and attaching the worm gear bearing seat would have been a personal nightmare. So I used thick styrene as a base for a new gear tower. I first placed the small axle gears on the new axle center lines. The large FM gears were necessary to span the new axle gear spacing. The worm gear was in position to drive the large diameter FM intermediate gear. The Athearn worm gear bearing seat was then salvaged and positioned on my new gear tower frame. Securing the glue-resistant Delrin worm gear bearing seat was the next challenge. I know of no adhesive that will secure styrene to Delrin, but I remembered a sports car enthusiast site that had repaired plastic bumpers using metal window screen material. So I used a small piece of stainless steel screen from a thrift store kitchen strainer. So here's the result I wanted. The screen is simply melted into the two plastic pieces to be adjoined. This video shows you how I did it. I just used my soldering iron to melt the wire screen into the plastic. As the screen material gets warmer, the time it takes to embed the screen into the plastic becomes shorter. Here are the two sides of my scratch-bashed gear tower brought together, and the worm gear is secured using the Athearn worm gear clip. I still have to devise a way to secure the two gear tower halves, mount the resin GSC truck side frames, and pick up track power through the Athearn wheels. I'll save those solutions for an upcoming chassis video. I thank you for watching. I hope you'll join me for the next video when I begin modifying Athearn U-boat shells to make my GE U30C. Until then, happy modeling.